to the thousands who are injured and suffering, and bring fortitude to the families of all of the victims. Dear God, bring down your guardian angels right this minute to the rescue workers and the medical personnel who are working around the clock to try to save lives and to try those who are finding lives. Dear God, we need your help. Our hearts and prayers also go out to members of our own Senate family who are feeling this in a very deep and personal way. Our two colleagues from New York who are in the city this evening, as well as to our senators from Connecticut and New Jersey and what they feel. To the senators from Virginia and to my own colleague from Maryland, we lost people at the Pentagon. Our minds are seared today with images we can still scarcely comprehend. For me, one of the most terrible of those images was the sight of thick smoke over Arlington Cemetery. I couldn't believe it. The graves in that hallowed ground remind us that Americans have faced great evil before, and you know what? We've defeated it. We are united in our resolve to do it again. The question I think all of us are facing is, why are good, innocent people allowed to suffer? This question is as old as humanity. It was the cry of Job, and it's the question that haunts us today. I don't know the answer, but I want to share with you a passage from the book of Job. Job says this, "The thing which I feared greatly has come upon me. That which I was afraid has come to me. Today, what we have feared has come to our land." But again, like Job, we know that the grace of God can lead us to do the right thing. We ask God for the courage and the wisdom to respond rightly. I believe that God was with the victims of yesterday's attack. I believe God was with them in their hour of travail, fear, and death. I believe He is here with all of those who grieve and all those who suffer with these so many good and innocent people. And I believe He will be with us in our search for answers and justice. That's my prayer this evening. We're not going to sacrifice our ideals in the pursuit of the monsters who attacked us. We're not going to compromise our principles for which so many Americans fought and died. But we will root out those who committed this atrocity. We will pursue justice. And with God's grace, we're going to move forward. We're going to be a stronger nation and a better people than before. So let's again ask for God's mercy. Let's ask for God's forgiveness upon those who did this terrible deed, and that they might repent and turn to a different life. And let us then try to find what is the good and righteous thing to do. God bless you, and God bless America.
As we watch this prayer vigil at the United States Capitol for members of Congress and their spouses, I'm Judy Woodruff in Washington. I'm going to say goodnight for now, but in just a moment, Wolf Blitzer, Greta Van Susteren will be with us as our coverage continues of the attack on America.
Tonight, America under attack. How could it happen? 4 airliners take off from 3 airports within a 12-minute span. All have hijackers aboard.
A number of the suspected hijackers were trained as pilots in the United States.
3 planes are used for suicide attacks. 1 does not find its objective. We'll take a close look at just what happened aboard those planes. Meticulous planning, plenty of resources, deadly will. Who did it? How did they do it? And why? We'll speak live with Senators John McCain and Richard Shelby, former New York Police Commissioner Ray Kelly, former CIA Director Jim Woolsey, and other top intelligence and law enforcement authorities. And as investigators begin casting their net, we'll go live to our CNN correspondents on the scene to find out what happens next.
Blitzer reporting tonight from Washington. Behind me, the White House, the Washington Monument, and a short distance away, just across the Potomac River, the Pentagon, symbols of a country which has now come under attack.
And I'm Greta Van Susteren. On this day after, how did it happen? How could it have happened? We'll do our best to answer those two questions.
For those of you who are just joining us, here's a quick update on the developments at this hour. Another building adjacent to New York's World Trade Center has partially collapsed. The 54-story One Liberty Plaza building was the new home of the NASDAQ Stock Exchange. Rescue workers combing the wreckage of the Trade Center's twin towers were evacuated. Earlier, they had pulled 9 people alive from the rubble. At the Pentagon, parts of which are still smoldering, firefighters showed their courage and their colors, and the president paid a visit.
Coming here makes me sad on the one hand. It also makes me angry. And our country will, however, not be cowed by terrorists, by people who don't share the same values we share, by people who are willing to destroy people's lives.
Boston, where 2 of the hijacked flights originated, is a focus of the investigation. Police and FBI agents swarmed a downtown hotel, and a car containing suspicious materials was impounded at Logan Airport. A number of people have been taken into custody, several of them in Florida, where authorities zeroed in on aviation schools and a home where one of the suspected hijackers may have lived. For more on the developments in Boston, let's go to CNN's Boston Bureau Chief Bill Delaney. Bill, tell us what we know right now.
Well, Wolf, to give you an idea of the sheer dimensions of the investigations here, 150 state police detectives assigned to investigate Logan Airport alone, among hundreds of FBI, state, and local police who are fanning out for whatever evidence they can garner and talking now to people who have been taken into custody. 3 people taken into custody at Boston's Westin Copley Hotel today in extraordinary scenes in Copley Square in the heart of Boston. Usually a place people sit around and look at fountains and pigeons. Today, FBI SWAT teams, heavily armed with machine guns, storming into the Westin Copley Hotel where they took into custody 3 men. Now, FBI Director Robert Mueller himself being careful to point out that these were not arrests. These men have been brought in for questioning, for possible links, for possible information as sources to try to understand who committed the hijackings that left Boston, the 2 planes that crashed into the World Trade Center. Now, after the arrests, bomb-sniffing dogs made what authorities call a hit in the Boston Westin Hotel. It was at that point that the hotel and a nearby shopping mall were evacuated, adding thousands into an already extraordinary scene in Copley Square, where thousands of onlookers had already gathered. Now thousands came out, evacuated from those hotels in mostly calm scenes. Now it's being widely reported and sourced as well by CNN sources that the hijackers who came to Boston came from 2 places, from 2 directions. One team from Canada. Now a car at Portland International Airport has become a focus for state police there. They believe that was a car used by at least one of the hijackers. Another car is here in Boston. Now, this was taken into custody at Central Parking here yesterday. It's now at an FBI processing center near Boston, and this a very important piece of evidence, apparently, indeed. Arabic language flight training manuals reportedly found in that car, and CNN's Mike Betcher reporting earlier that the car was registered to 2 Arabs. Back to you, Wolf.
Well, Delaney, very briefly, do we know when Boston's Logan Airport will reopen?
Closed indefinitely while officials here try to work with those FAA guidelines that have been imposed on airports around the country. It's closed indefinitely.
Okay, Bill Delaney in Boston, thank you very much. Greta?
The investigation into the attacks is literally spanning the globe, with hundreds of agents and law enforcement agencies involved and new leads developing by the hour. For a look at the big picture, let's go now to CNN's justice correspondent Kelly Arena in Washington. Kelly, give me an idea, big picture, how many people are involved in this investigation?
The FBI says they have 4,000 special agents, 3,000 support personnel. That's not to mention the hundreds of people that work in the FBI labs working on this investigation around the nation. And they are pursuing, at last count, more than 2,000 leads.
Now, when you talk about this investigation, a number of crime scenes, you've got Boston, you've got Newark, you've got Pennsylvania. Let me go through the different crime scenes and tell me what's going on. In Boston, what kind of investigation are they doing at the airport?
Well, at all of those locations, Greta, what the FBI has done, has identified the takeoff sites, not only the airports themselves, but the surrounding areas, and then the crash sites as crime scenes. And at those locations, what they're doing is they're dusting for fingerprints. They are going through passenger manifests, rental car records. They're looking at telephone logs, videotape from parking garages, looking at payphone videotapes. And we were even told by some law enforcement sources that investigators in Florida, for example, are going through neighborhoods and restaurants showing people pictures of suspected hijackers. So they're really pounding the pavement and trying to gather as much forensic evidence as possible.
And the crash site in Pennsylvania, is that getting closer examination? Because at least the plane at least has a chance of more parts there.
Well, exactly. I mean, in Pennsylvania, that was the only plane that went into the ground instead of into a building, so they have a much better chance of getting at it and really trying to get some information. Plus, law enforcement sources also tell CNN that the transponder on that plane was open for a period on that flight, so they may have information, at least air traffic control may have information directly from the cockpit on that flight. And as you know, Greta, we also have people who have called from not only the Pennsylvania flight but others, but specifically from Pennsylvania. We've heard from family members that have outlined the tragedy that went on that flight.
Kelly Arena, thank you for joining me tonight. Wolf?
World Trade Center and the Pentagon, quote, acts of war, and officials now say the White House itself was an intended target. Let's go live to CNN senior White House correspondent John King. So obviously at the White House. John, tell us what we know about that.
Well, Wolf, to put this new information in context, let's think back to yesterday morning when the first pictures were being shown of those planes hitting the World Trade Center. We saw an evacuation here at the White House. CNN is also told now by sources that Vice President Dick Cheney, National Security Advisor Condoleezza Rice, other top White House officials were ushered out of their offices to a command and control bunker, a fortified command and control bunker deep beneath the White House grounds here. Why? Administration officials now saying that that plane that came across the Potomac River caused so much damage across the river at the Pentagon. Its initial target, we are now told, might not have been the Pentagon.
We have real incredible information that the airplane that landed at the Pentagon was originally intended to hit the White House.
Can you tell us about the nature of that evidence?
No, of course I cannot. Any questions relating to how we have obtained any of this information, sources and methods, I will of course not answer.
Why it changed course, why it went to the Pentagon and not the White House?
We really do not know the answer to that.
Administration officials also saying not just the White House, but in their view, they also believe that Air Force One, the president's jet, was a target for the terrorists. That, they say, the reason the president did not fly directly back to Washington from Sarasota, Florida. You will remember he stopped first at a military installation in Louisiana, then a military installation in Nebraska. Only then did the president return to Washington with an extraordinary fighter escort visible to those flying aboard Air Force One. The administration saying it believed Air Force One was a target as well. Some sources even saying they believe that plane that crashed outside of Pittsburgh was planning to turn south and bank its way toward Washington and, if possible, emphasis on if possible, collide with Air Force One as the president was returning to Washington. Wolf?
John, pretty amazing stuff. The president did meet with his national security team once again today. Do we know anything at all about a timetable for a possible U.S. military response?
We know nothing specific about a timetable except the public words of the president and the defense secretary, Donald Rumsfeld, both saying to be patient, that fighting terrorism will not come in a day or two. But we do know, Wolf, from sources familiar with those discussions, the president met twice with his national security team today, and we are told that among the items discussed were possible U.S. military options. We're told, though, these discussions are in their earliest stages. The priority right now for the administration, building broad diplomatic support. The president spoke today to a half-dozen international leaders, including the presidents of China and Russia, and the administration very much welcoming NATO's statement that these terrorist attacks on the United States, in the view of NATO, are attacks on the NATO alliance. So the president promising there will be consequences to this, but also saying it might take some time.
John King at the White House, thank you very much. Back to you, Greta.
New information, Wolf, is emerging about what happened aboard those 4 hijacked planes before they were brought